Hey everybody, this is Perch. I thought I'd do this video, which I was sitting down to kind of give you some real technical analysis on, it, and then I realized that wasn't necessary. And then actually, what was necessary is more of a anecdotal, more of just kind of a broad overview. It's going to make a lot more sense to a lot more people. So the purpose of this video is, comic sales and numbers, and what do you trust, and what is out there. And you can die through complexity. And what I mean by that is, and I'll give you this analogy because you can see it play out on like the Beat and sites like that, who will say comic numbers are up 20%. And that's the headline. And when you look at that, you're like, oh, wow, that's great. But when you dig into the details, you learn that up 20% has a number of caveats and nuances to it. It's what's being counted. How orders are those? What is counted as a comic book? That have changed from year to year. Typically, when you're doing statistical analysis, if you have an MBA or you've got some interns coming in to do business, one of the first things they'll do is they say, and you probably have heard this term before, you need to establish a baseline. A baseline is a repeatable set of information that you can say, I'm getting to, the expression is apples to apples. Meaning, if I say, how many cars are sold in a year, year over year, that I'm counting cars the same way. I don't count cars, with four wheels one year and then go ahead and add in motorcycles the next, and then, hell, an airplane has cars, so let's just add that in the following year. That changes your baseline. You do not. There's a number of different ways, by the way, what establishing a baseline means, but this is one of the most common. And if you are getting a job in any kind of financial analysis, or you're a project manager, or you're any kind of job that requires kind of logic or a spec or providing information, one of the things that I've told people and have coached and mentored on is you have to establish the ground rules. You have to establish, what is it that we're talking about? Set the stage. And so when you get to comic numbers, it's frequently all over the place. Now, does that mean that comic sales are up 20% is a lie? No, it's a truthful statement. It's just that things went into that statement to make that true, and you need to make sure mentally you're thinking of the same things that the person who wrote that did. If you're going into it saying, well, comic sales means Western comics and not manga and not scholastic and not graphic novels and not kid, and that's all it means, and another person's going into it thinking it includes everything that has pictures and text on a book, you've got two wildly different perspectives, and so you're going to fight. And a lot of people do fight. So when you get into comic numbers, there's some important things to deal with, and the details do matter, but you can also get lost in the details. So I'm not going to tell you what to believe. This is not a video of saying that you should count manga or you shouldn't count manga or other. That's up to you. You decide how you want to do it. But what I would ask is, if you're going to go around, you're going to throw numbers, and you're going to, at least know what's in the numbers you're throwing around. At least know your facts to the statement you're making. So there's a couple different ways you can look at comic numbers today that are publicly available. And I'll say at the offset, none of them are inclusive of the entire business. And in fact, many of them are wildly undersampling what the actual business is. So one of the most common ones that people used for a long time was Comicron. Now, Comicron is run by a good guy, and by the way, I won't hear shit about him. He has always 100% been honest about where his numbers are coming from and the math he's doing. He does not, it is in there. He does not hide it. He does not try and trick you into thinking, of things. A lot of people have taken, Comicron's numbers and run analysis off of them and come up with their own conclusions. And then this guy, John Jackson Miller, Comicron, gets sucked into that. But he's providing a formula, and he tells you how he's providing the formula, and there's nothing wrong with what he's doing. If you don't like the way people use his data, save your ire, save the frustration for the people who are manipulating it, and use it, not him. But anyway, for a long time, he was able to get numbers from Diamond directly, and so he had very accurate sales and order information. And when I say very accurate, I still do not mean 100%. Reorders would sometimes get dropped. Diamond was sometimes inaccurate. There are a number of places where he would, he's giving you the best he had, but the accuracy of his information was like 90%. Let's give it that. It was relatively solid, and he would go back at different times and augment the data and improve it when he could. Since COVID hit, and in particular since DC left Diamond, went to Lunar, the numbers started to change, and then Marvel started, not Diamond basically no longer needed to report the accurate data. Someone went to Penguin Random House. It everywhere the numbers all dispersed, and nobody is under federal law to report on the data, and so they stopped reporting on the data. They started providing the data, I should say. So what Comicron did, and what a couple others did, is they went to this system called Comic Hub, and Comics Hub is a point of sale piece of software that tracks and helps stores kind of manage their stuff. It is not widely adopted. It is actually dramatically under adopted. I think it represents less than 10% of comic shops out there. I may be wrong about that stat, so check it out for yourself. But it is far from the majority. It is, in statistical analysis terms, given the volume of material going through it and the relative install base of the software, it is not at a state where it's providing business accurate numbers. It's just not. Again, it's does that mean you should throw it away and never look at it? No, it's a data point, but it's one from a very small sampling of stores. And so what they've done is they've taken that small sampling and they've kind of averaged it out. And they've done some equations to say, we think that this is representative where the industry is going, but in reality, it is not. So that's one place where you can get numbers. But when you look at a lot of things, ICV2 and a lot of these others, they're getting it from this Comics Hub system. So they're getting it from a system that is not accurate. Sorry, let me rephrase. Not inclusive of comics, of all sales. And the other thing that is important to factor in, and this is one of those things I haven't heard a lot of people talk to, but it is true, is new comic sales, meaning comics that are sold, week in, week out on Wednesdays, are often overrepresented by a couple either really large places like Midtown or places that are, I would say, more traditional. And what I mean by that is old-fashioned traditional comic stores in Tennessee, in outskirts of Dallas, places like that. If you are in any kind of retailer group, there are typically in kind of a Memphis has one, these bigger stores that do a healthy business of new comics. They're very region specific, meaning what sells in one region may be vastly different than what sells in another. And those places tend to be less modern. This is a topic that we've had, in Facebook quite a bit of why are some of these stores most modern? Well, for one simple reason, because they haven't needed to modernize. They have an established, predictable business of selling new comics. It hasn't really changed the last 15 years. Of course, they want to be more modern, but there hasn't been a compelling reason to do so. So, point of sale software like like Comic Hub, like some of these others, there's less incentive for those stores to go to it, and they haven't. But some of these stores are some of the highest volume sellers. If you talk to Diamond and you talk to some of the traditional distributors, these are some of the higher sellers of new comics. So again, this is why those numbers, you should take them with a very large grain of salt. They're indicative, but they're not inclusive of where the industry is going. So that's primary. And so what happens is people take basically an estimate from a very small sample size, and they then run analysis around that. Oftentimes, and again, just speaking truth here, they often do so in an attempt to solve the problem they want to solve. Meaning they already have the answer, and the answer is, hey, we want to go dunk on the chuds that are saying that comic books aren't selling, so therefore we need a headline that say comic business is up. How do we do that? Well, we're going to go cherry pick inaccurate data from a small sample size. We're going to do a very, very, and this is legit what I've seen people do. They go into Excel, they throw these numbers in, and they say, well, if this represents 10% of the market times 10 to get 100%, that's our number. Which is, anybody with any kind of basic financial analysis will tell you A is wrong, and B makes no sense anyway, because the number that they're giving you from Comicron is already an all-in number. It's taking a much smaller Comic Hub number, and Miller is doing the amalgamation to total industry. He's not just giving you the 10%, he's giving you his estimate. And quite frankly, I trust Miller's attempt to do that a hell of a lot better than some reporter for the beat who is using Excel. So that's one factor. But then the other thing is that's where you start to lump in, what's going on. And in some of the things that I've seen in the last month, I'm watching people starting to lump in numbers from Amazon. So that's interesting. And we've reported on Amazon before, but Amazon is a very different business, both in terms of how the retail works, what the profit margin is like, throughput of books. Miss Marvel, when the Disney Plus show was out, sold really well on Amazon for 2 weeks. Guess what's selling right now when She-Hulk is out? Can you guess what is selling really well? It's She-Hulk. Amazon tends to be highly, highly tied to whatever is going on in the media and TV. If a movie comes out, the comic books spike. The thing to look at with Amazon is trends over time. But what happens with a lot of these people who are doing the numbers and analysis for you is they look at a point in time, meaning not how things are moving from week to week, but what happened this week. And that's why, you see some articles going, Miss Marvel is killing it. Sales are up 560%. I saw this article. So that's an absurd stat to give because number one, you're looking at 1 week of sales. Number two, you're talking about a book that was just put back into circulation, who's recently been pushed with a new marketing campaign because of the Disney Plus show. That gives you no trend, no baseline. It's a great story if your article if you want your article to say, Muslim-based female superhero defies white supremacists who want diversity out of comics with huge sales. If that's your headline, then you can grab a couple pieces of information and you can get it there. By the way, this is just as disingenuous as the person who goes, Marvel imploding, falling apart because one title isn't selling well. That's the lunacy here. Anyway, craziness, right? This is all crazy. So when you see these numbers, the right answer is simply this. Yeah, they're helpful. No, you shouldn't ignore them. No, you don't dismiss them out of hand. But they're not gospel. This is not the hardened facts. And understand that the numbers that Comicron, for example, was providing 5 years ago are different from the numbers today. There's a major difference. Doesn't mean it's crap. Doesn't mean you ignore it. But it does mean that it's no longer apples to apples with what you had. Anyway, there you go. That's my pitch today. Hope that is helpful. Hope that clarified anything. I got nothing. Thanks for listening.